in the history of artificial intelligence, people have been borrowing like crazy. Many of the starting points of artificial intelligence have been the best ideas brought up from outside of the field, and that has been very successful. So we should expect this to continue in the future. Similarly, we have a lot of interesting issues going on here. So one of the new issues is, of course, that we've got amazing amounts of hardware. So think of steam engines. This is the kind of steam engines that are driving a lot of new computer science. Partially it is just because we can make use of supercomputers and more so, and that can sometimes make a difference. As a computer scientist, I was taught that, well, you can never outrun a combinatorial explosion. If the problem is just too large, it doesn't matter how much computing power you have, because your computer is always going to be puny compared to the problem. However, it turns out that sometimes it actually does work. Sometimes brute force works well. Jürgen Schmidt-Huber, for example, solved a classic problem of number recognition simply by using an old-fashioned 80s algorithm, but using a massively parallel GPU supercomputer on it. Computing power we didn't have in the 80s could actually produce a really good result now, simply because we can throw enough at it. And since we're in the commercial incentive, we're going to have even more of that in the future. We also got ridiculous amounts of data, and again you can do amazing things. So these are a few pictures from one of my favorite examples, where people took 80 million pictures from Google Images and used that to create a computer vision system. So it looks at the picture and compares it to the 1,000 most similar pictures. That's extremely stupid, but it works amazingly well at identifying everything from hammers to persons. So using a lot of this data, you can become rich if you happen to invent Google. And you might be able to mine it to get something rather smart, because we are doing enormous data mining every day using our own systems. And here is just a simple example. This is a small graph, a rather typical one, how much the performance of the computer translation language system improves when you feed it more words. And it turns out that, well, it goes up. And if you can give it 1 billion words, then it reaches 95% accuracy, which is generally regarded as this application good enough and equivalent to humans. So if we just happen to have that 1 billion words, in that case we can do amazing things. Well, Google certainly got it, and we can imagine a lot of other groups sitting on that kind of data. And of course, these faster computers raises a good question. Are the faster computers making our computer software smarter, or is it inventions in the software? So here is a typical example where there's a plot for a particular numerical application. So the slanted lines here correspond to how much things improve if you just use the old software or faster and faster and faster computing. The jumps in this diagram correspond to coming up with better ways of solving it. And you can obviously see that this produces an amazing improvement that's much faster than our computers can improve. Because coming up with a smarter way of doing it, that's equivalent to decades of computer hardware improvement. Similarly, chess programs have been improving at an amazing rate, while humans don't improve that much. So if you plot it over time, it looks like, oh, chess computers are going up at a fairly even scale. But if you actually look at how they're going to compare to the computing power, you occasionally see jumps. And that is when somebody comes up with a smarter way of solving a problem. This is exactly the same thing when we're looking at playing backgammon. And, well, it turns out that a slightly smarter way is the reason the latest version of this particular championship winning game is so good. Alright, so this seems to suggest that there are reasons to think that it's not just hardware. But you might remember the DARPA Grand Challenge. That was automated cars driving around the American desert. And the first year was a fiasco. None of the automated cars got anywhere, essentially. The second year, several actually managed to drive through the desert course. And the third challenge, that was driving according to the California traffic regulations together with other cars. And it was very successful. And, although the car might still not be quite up to human standard, we're getting there rapidly. This happened over a span of around a few years. And computer hardware didn't have much time to improve during that time. So it seems like the software is causing jumps, but they're rare. They're about ideas and they're hard to predict. Of course, number of people also matters. This is the number of computer scientists in America. And as you can see, it's gone up quite a lot. However, many of them, of course, work on boring business systems rather than making amazingly smart computers. So it's debatable how much input they actually give. But when we have other interesting ideas, well, the singularity and intelligence experiment, I'm very happy that I don't need to dwell too much of my time on this slide. But the basic idea here is, of course, that, well, if we can make some kind of software that improves, you're going to get more improvement faster, and that might blow up and produce some quite dramatic things. And that also has led to another interesting current issue, which I think is going to be much bigger. The question of friendly AI. How do you actually make artificial intelligence that you want to hang around with? The paper-tip AI is dangerous, and it's kind of stupid. But even more horrible would be a really smart AI that says, oh, I figured out the true moral theory for the universe. Unfortunately, humans are unethical, so I have to wipe you all out. Depending on your own moral use, this might be a very good or a very bad thing. After all, let's assume that we got the true moral theory. What we really want to figure out is, of course, how to construct systems that actually would like to work together with us, even when we improve themselves tremendously. The interesting thing about this concept is that it doesn't make sense without thinking about superintelligence. If we were all concerned just about industrial robots, maybe of human ability, well, in that case, it wouldn't be too much to talk about. Because that's not that threatening. An industrial robot might run around in a room, but it's not a threat to the world. It's when you start thinking that singularity might actually happen that the AI becomes an interesting problem. And as Eudoxa, who's been leading the charge of actually doing something about it, said it's also kind of infinite cookie jar. At least for philosophy, we're probably going to be working endlessly on this because it's an extremely hard problem. It might even turn out to be fundamentally unsolvable in some interesting way, which is of course young for us philosophers. And of course, brain emulation. This is again a new issue because thanks to the computing power that advances in neuroscience and everything else, it actually started to look like it's not too unreasonable to think that at some point in perhaps not close, but at least foreseeable future, we might run computer simulation large enough to encompass our brains. Now, these are kind of current issues. There are also interesting things on the theoretical front. So this slide, that actually depicts the recipe for making a superintelligence. You could go off and write this on the computer and you would have a real superintelligence. This is from Marcus Hutter and it's called something called IXE. I don't have the time to get into the details, but it's possible to prove that this is, in a sense, the smartest possible algorithm. It's also enormously practical. It won't do any good written on any current computer. But it's very useful for proving things theoretically. We can actually do mathematical proofs about some things superintelligence would or wouldn't be doing. So, for example, we managed to prove that this algorithm is not friendly, and in fact it could be very dangerous if you could actually build it, because then it could really become a real predictor. So we're seeing this advancing realization that we can actually make theories about superintelligence without being able to build one. So, well, what more? Well, I don't have much time, so let's just skip past these ones, but we're getting new approaches, and that is going to see through. So where do I think, in this final minute, where we go to see the new idea sources? Well, we have a lot of new fields where artificial intelligence is getting with it. Of course, security. People are very interested in the anti-terrorism community and of using this. So we're going to see a lot of problems from that being turned into artificial intelligence problems, which do not necessarily mean they're just going to be used for surveillance. They might actually turn out to inspire a lot of other interests. We're getting a globalized world with many more people having access to computing. We're going to come up with our own problems which we have never been able to think of. Ecological technology is going to be big. We're getting new forms of manufacturing. These are going to pose outside problems for artificial intelligence, but they're going to lead to completely new and unexpected approaches. We're also getting these new extreme tools. We're getting more and more sensors everywhere, swarms of data. We might be getting reconfigurable hardware. There might even be something interesting going on with quantum computers, although so far I haven't seen an algorithm of quantum computers that really helps AI, but that might change. But most interesting is, of course, we might be getting conceptual jumps. And these ones are the trickiest one because we can never predict them. To some degree, we already see them. The original view was the artificial intelligence is a thing, an object. And then it's going to become a being. And now we should realize, no, they can be systems. Google is in a sense an artificial intelligence, not just the server farms, but the company. And I know I'm all exactly out of time, so let me just go quickly past to this final thing. We might also discover things that don't make sense, and that's of course the most valuable one, but by definition we cannot predict them. So the real issue here is that we're getting stop-and-go acceleration. I'm rather confident that, we're going to see a lot of accelerated progress among the known unknowns. And then I think we're going to see a lot of progress among unknown unknowns. But we cannot, almost by definition, know when it's going to happen. And that's problematic, because if there is anything my studies have told me, is that artificial intelligence is going to be an enormously big thing. Which means that policy would be a very good thing to have ahead of time, but we can't. And that poses perhaps the deepest challenge to our current human understanding of how to figure out how to live with that. Thank you.